Sarah Chen walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber. Her heart pounded as she looked up at the enormous room. The ceiling stretched so high she could barely see it. Thousands of alien beings sat in rows that went up and up like a giant stadium. She had practiced this moment for months. Earth's best scientists, diplomats, and leaders had prepared her for this day. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of standing here, representing all of humanity before creatures from across the galaxy. The chamber fell silent as she approached the center platform. Her footsteps echoed loudly in the huge space. She could feel thousands of eyes watching her. Some of those eyes were familiar, round like human eyes. Others were completely alien. Some beings had no eyes at all, just glowing patches on their heads. To her right sat the Zephyrians. They looked like tall, thin humans made of light. Their bodies flickered and glowed like candle flames. They whispered to each other in voices that sounded like wind chimes. On her left were the hive minds from Kepler 442. They looked like giant insects with 4 arms and wings that sparkled like jewels. Their queen sat in the center, twice as large as the others. She clicked and buzzed, and her workers translated her words into galactic standard language. Behind them sat the architects. These ancient beings looked like living crystals. They were older than most star systems. Their home world had been destroyed billions of years ago, but they still existed, moving from planet to planet, building and creating. At the highest point in the chamber sat Council Speaker Thane Vor. He was reptilian with green scales that caught the light. His species, the Dominion, had ruled the galactic government for over 10,000 years. His yellow eyes looked down at Sarah with what seemed like boredom. Sarah took a deep breath and activated her translator device. Her words would be heard by every being in the chamber, converted into their own languages. "Honored council members," she began, "I am Ambassador Sarah Chen, speaking for the planet Earth and all humanity. I come before you today not in celebration but in desperate need." She pressed a button on her device. Holographic images appeared in the air above her head. The images showed space, dark, empty space, but something was moving through it. Something terrible. 6 months ago, our deep space telescopes detected this, she said. The hologram showed a massive cloud of metal objects moving between the stars. We call them the Void Swarm. They are not alive, but they are not simple machines either. They consume everything in their path. The images changed. Now they showed planets. Beautiful worlds with blue oceans and green forests. Then the same planets, gray and lifeless. The Void Swarm had stripped them bare, taking all metal, all technology, all traces of civilization. They have already destroyed 12 star systems, Sarah continued. Billions of lives lost. Entire civilizations wiped out in days. And now, she paused, her voice shaking slightly. Now they are heading for Earth. More images appeared. Computer models showing the swarm's path. Mathematical calculations, all pointing to the same terrible conclusion. They will reach our solar system in 6 months, Sarah said. Our scientists estimate they will consume Earth in less than a week. 8 billion human lives will be lost. She looked around the chamber. Some beings leaned forward, interested. Others seemed to be sleeping. A few were openly laughing at something one of their neighbors had said. We are not asking you to fight for us, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. We know we are new to the galactic community. We know our technology is primitive compared to yours. But we are asking for sanctuary, a place for our people to survive. We can work, we can learn, we can contribute to galactic society. We just need a chance, she gestured to the images again. Our ships can carry perhaps 1 million people each. We have plans to build as many as possible in the time we have left. But we need places to take them. Worlds where they can live and rebuild. The chamber buzzed with conversation as beings talked among themselves. Sarah waited, hoping for some sign of sympathy or help. Council Speaker Thane Vor raised one clawed hand. The chamber fell silent. The human has spoken, he said. His voice was deep and cold. The council will now discuss this request. A Zephyrian representative flickered brighter. The humans seek aid for their world. But what have they contributed to galactic civilization? They have been part of our community for less than 1 standard year. One of the insect beings clicked loudly. The translator converted her words. The human homeworld is known for violence. Their history shows constant warfare. Their own people fight each other over resources and beliefs. Why should we welcome such aggressive beings to our worlds? An architect's crystal form rang like a bell as it spoke. Their technology is indeed primitive. They still use chemical rockets for space travel. They burn fossil fuels for energy. They have not even mastered their own climate. What could such beings offer to advanced civilizations? Sarah tried to speak, but Thanevor gestured for silence. The humans ask us to save them, he said, but they have shown no evidence that they deserve saving. Their world faces destruction because they cannot defend themselves. This is natural selection on a galactic scale. More voices joined in. Sarah heard words like primitive, violent, and worthless translated from dozens of languages. Her face grew hot with anger and shame, but she forced herself to stay calm. A tall, blue-skinned being stood up. Sarah recognized him as a representative from the Peaceful Worlds Alliance. For a moment, hope filled her chest. Perhaps, the being said slowly, we could offer limited sanctuary, a few thousand humans on each willing world, the strongest and most intelligent. Let the best of their species survive to serve our civilizations. A kind offer, Thanevor replied, but the logistics would be overwhelming. Moving even a few million beings across the galaxy would require enormous resources better spent on our own people. The chamber erupted in laughter. Not cruel laughter, Sarah realized, but the kind of laughter adults make when a child asks for something impossible. They thought humanity's request was funny. They thought human lives were a joke. Thanevor stood up. His massive form cast a shadow over Sarah. The Council has reached its decision, he announced. The human request for aid is denied. The request for sanctuary is denied. Earth and its inhabitants are not our responsibility. Sarah felt the words hit her like physical blows. Around the chamber, beings were already getting up to leave. To them, this was over. Just another item of business completed. But Sarah was not finished. You're making a mistake, she called out. Her voice echoed through the chamber, stopping the exodus of alien representatives. You look at humanity and see only our wars, our struggles, our failures. But you don't see our strength. Thanevor turned back to her, his yellow eyes narrowing. You see primitive beings who fight among themselves, Sarah continued. But we fight because we care. We fight for our families, our beliefs, our future, and when something threatens all of humanity, we stop fighting each other and fight together. She looked around the chamber, meeting as many alien gazes as she could. You think we're too young, too violent, too weak to matter. You're wrong. Humanity doesn't break easily. We don't give up. And we don't forget who stands with us, or who turns away when we need help. She gathered her data files and walked toward the exit. At the doorway, she turned back one last time. When this is over, she said quietly, remember that you had a choice, and remember what choice you made. The doors closed behind her with a final echoing boom. The recording of Sarah Chen's speech spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, it was playing on every major news network, entertainment channel, and social platform from the core worlds to the outer rim. On Zephyria Prime, the most popular comedy show opened with a sketch. A flickering comedian pretended to be Sarah, speaking in an exaggerated accent. Please save us. We promise we'll stop being violent. The audience of light beings sparkled with laughter. The hive minds turned it into a dance. Thousands of insect beings moved in perfect formation, acting out humanity's desperate wiggling, as they called it. The Queen's laughter buzzed across their homeworld for days. Even the ancient architects found humor in it. They created crystal sculptures showing tiny human figures begging before massive alien forms. The art pieces were titled, When Children Play at Being Adults. But it was Lady Kess of the Ethereal Collective who made it truly viral. She posted the full recording on the Galactic Network with a simple caption. Today, a primitive species asked us to save them from their own failures. The entertainment value is considerable. Within a day, her post had 40 billion views. Comments poured in from across the galaxy. Did they really think we'd waste resources on them? A trader from the merchant worlds, I've seen more advanced technology in my food processor. A citizen of the Tech Republic? Maybe if they tried talking to the Void Swarm really nicely. A comedian from the Laughter Moons. The mockery continued for weeks. Comedians made careers out of imitating human desperation. Musicians composed songs about the species that couldn't. Artists painted pictures of humans crying in spacesuits. But while the galaxy laughed, Earth was working. President Maria Martinez stood before the United Nations General Assembly. The hall was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth. For the first time in human history, there were no empty seats, no boycotts, no walkouts. My fellow humans, she began, the galaxy has given us their answer. We are alone. The hall was silent. Outside, the world watched on every screen, every device, every broadcast system on the planet. They think we are weak, Martinez continued. They think we are primitive. They think we will simply lie down and die when the void swarm arrives. She paused, looking out at the faces of humanity's leaders. They are wrong. The room erupted in applause, but Martinez raised her hand for silence. Today I am signing the Terra Protocols. Every nation, every government, every organization on Earth will unite for one purpose: survival. Not just survival, victory. The protocols were simple but revolutionary. Every military on Earth would merge into a single force. Every scientist would share their research freely. Every factory would be converted to produce what humanity needed to fight. Every resource would be pooled together. There would be no more separate countries, no more competing economies, no more political games. There was only Earth, and Earth would fight. Dr. Elena Vasquez received the call while she was watching the galaxy mock her species on the news. She was Earth's leading expert on alien technology, one of the few humans who had studied captured void swarm debris from the destroyed systems. Dr. Vasquez, the voice on the phone said, "This is President Martinez. How would you like to save humanity?" 3 days later, Elena stood in what used to be the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, but now it was something else entirely. Workers from 50 countries were expanding it, modifying it, turning it into something the galaxy had never seen. Project Prometheus, Elena explained to her new team. We're going to reverse engineer void swarm technology, not to copy it, to improve it. Her assistant, Dr. Kim, looked worried. The swarm's technology is millions of years more advanced than ours. How can we possibly? Because we think differently, Elena interrupted. The swarm is logical, predictable. It follows patterns. But humans? We're chaotic. We're creative. We break rules the swarm doesn't even know exist. Meanwhile, General Marcus Stone was doing something that had never been done before. He was turning Earth's entire industrial capacity into a war machine. Not just the military factories, everything. Car manufacturers started building spacecraft hulls. Computer chip companies began producing weapons guidance systems. Even toy factories were converted to make components for the war effort. But Stone's greatest achievement was less visible. He was reaching out beyond Earth, making contact with species the Galactic Council had rejected. The Korth had been exiled from the galaxy 300 years ago. The Council called them too aggressive and a threat to civilized society. They lived on the edge of known space, surviving as mercenaries and raiders. Stone's message to them was simple. The galaxy rejected us both. Want to show them they were wrong? The Korth response came back in broken galactic standard. Humans fight good, we fight together. While Earth built its military, Sarah Chen had a different mission. She traveled to the forgotten corners of the galaxy, visiting species that had been ignored or cast out by the Council. She found the Wanderers, nomads whose homeworld had been destroyed in a corporate mining accident. The Council had offered them words of sympathy but no real help. She met with the Silence, beings who communicated through telepathy. The Council found them disturbing and excluded them from most galactic society. She spoke with the Breakers, a species of living rock who moved too slowly for the fast-paced galactic economy. They had been pushed out of civilized space decades ago. To each of them, Sarah brought the same message. Earth stands with the forgotten. As word of humanity's preparations spread, the galaxy's laughter began to change. News reports started analyzing Earth's military buildup. Scientists studied the modifications humans were making to their technology. On the entertainment networks, the tone shifted slightly. Comedians still made jokes, but now they included lines like, "At least they're trying, and it's almost admirable how hard they're working to delay the inevitable." Lady Kess posted an update. The humans continue their amusing preparations. Current betting odds on their survival time once the swarm arrives, 3.7 standard hours. The post received 50 billion views and twice as many comments. Most were still mocking, but some showed a hint of curiosity. Their ship designs are actually quite clever. An engineer. From the Builder Collective, I've never seen a species mobilize so completely. A military historian from the war colleges, they might last longer than we think. An anonymous comment from an unknown species, but the galaxy's opinion didn't matter to Earth anymore. Humanity had 6 months to prepare for a war they couldn't win against an enemy they couldn't understand. And they were going to fight anyway. In the depths of space, the Void Swarm continued its approach. Millions of mechanical beings, each the size of a small moon, drifted between the stars. They had no consciousness, no emotion, no fear. They simply consumed and grew stronger. They had destroyed 12 civilizations without effort. Earth would be the 13th. But as the swarm moved through the darkness, something was different this time. The target ahead was not just sitting and waiting to die. It was preparing. It was building. It was gathering allies. For the first time in the swarm's existence, prey was becoming predator. The galaxy was about to learn what humans really meant when they said they didn't break easily. Admiral Lisa Chen stood on the bridge of the TDF Defiance, watching the radar screen with growing concern. Sarah's sister had never expected to command humanity's first true space fleet, but the Terra protocols had changed everyone's life. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out. "Long-range sensors are picking up the swarm. They're early." Lisa felt her stomach drop. "How early?" "6 weeks, ma'am. They're moving faster than our projections indicated." Around the bridge, her crew went silent. They had trained for 6 months, but they were still weeks away from being fully ready. Earth's defenses were only 70% complete. The alliance with the Korth was still being finalized. Project Prometheus needed more time, but time was the one thing humanity no longer had. "Send a message to Earth Command," Lisa ordered. "Tell them the swarm will reach Jupiter's orbit in 6 weeks. Then signal the fleet. All ships are to move to intercept positions immediately." The Terran Defense Fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't built according to galactic standards of elegant design and efficient energy use. It was built by humans who had 6 months to save their species. The flagship Defiance had started life as a cargo hauler. Now it bristled with weapons that violated 17 different galactic warfare conventions. Nuclear torpedo launchers, kinetic kill vehicles, gravity mines that could crush a ship into a marble-sized ball of metal. Behind her flew 200 other ships, converted passenger liners with armor welded to their hulls, military vessels built in Earth's factories, even luxury yachts that had been turned into fast attack craft. None of them looked like proper warships. They looked like exactly what they were: civilian vessels turned into weapons by a desperate species that refused to die quietly. The Galactic Council had observation probes stationed throughout human space. They were supposed to document humanity's extinction for the historical archives. Instead, they were about to witness something unprecedented. Council Speaker Thane Vor watched the feed from his private chamber. He had been confident that the humans would run when the swarm appeared. Most species did. The smart ones evacuated their best and brightest. The desperate ones simply tried to hide, but the humans were doing neither. "Fascinating," he murmured to his aide. "They're actually advancing toward the swarm." On the screens, the human fleet spread out across space like a net. Their formation was chaotic by galactic standards, but there was a strange logic to it. They were positioning themselves to fight, not to run. "Sir," his aide said nervously, "should we warn them? The swarm has destroyed every military force it has encountered. The humans have no chance." Thane Vor's yellow eyes never left the screen. "No, let them learn the hard way. The galaxy will see what happens to species that refuse to accept their limitations." But as the two forces approached each other, something unexpected began to happen. The Void Swarm had been programmed to fight against conventional galactic forces. Elegant energy weapons, precise targeting systems, predictable tactical formations. The swarm had counters for all of these, but humanity fought differently. The first human weapon to fire was a nuclear minefield. Captain Rodriguez of the converted freighter Brave Spirit had deployed 50 nuclear warheads in the swarm's path, then waited. When the first swarm ships hit the field, the explosions lit up Jupiter's sky like a second sun. The swarm adapted quickly, deploying shields that could absorb nuclear energy. But then the humans switched tactics. The destroyer Bold Strike fired its main weapon, a railgun that launched telephone pole-sized pieces of metal at 10% the speed of light. The kinetic impact punched through swarm shields like they were paper. The swarm adapted again, reinforcing their defenses against kinetic weapons. But the humans had already moved on to their next surprise. Admiral Chen activated Project Valkyrie. 50 human ships suddenly accelerated directly toward the swarm formation, their crews broadcasting messages like "For Earth" and "Remember Terra." The swarm's computers analyzed the attack pattern and concluded the ships were attempting to ram their targets. This was against all galactic warfare conventions. No civilized species would sacrifice their crews so carelessly, but the humans weren't trying to ram. At the last second, they released their cargo. Thousands of small drones, each carrying a fusion bomb. The drones were too small and too fast for the swarm to target effectively. They swarmed over the mechanical ships like angry hornets. The explosions came in waves, each one carefully timed to create maximum chaos. Swarm ships collided with each other as their navigation systems failed. Their elegant formations broke apart into confusion. And then the Korth arrived. The exiled warrior species burst out of hyperspace in ships that looked like they had been built for one purpose: destruction. Where human ships were improvised and chaotic, Korth vessels were brutal and direct, massive engines, thick armor, and weapons that could crack a planet. But the real surprise was how well the two species worked together. Captain Stone of the Korth warship Bloodfang had been working with human tactical officers for months. When his ship's main gun overheated, 3 human vessels immediately moved to cover his retreat. When a cluster of swarm ships tried to flank the human formation, Korth fighters swept in to destroy them. The alliance that the Galactic Council had mocked was fighting, like they had trained together for years. Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the battle from Earth's command center, her hands flying over holographic displays. Project Prometheus was about to show its true purpose. "Lunar railgun is charged and ready," her assistant reported. Elena smiled grimly. While the galaxy had been laughing at humanity's preparations, she had been turning Earth's moon into the largest weapon in the solar system. Massive electromagnetic launchers built into lunar craters could accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. "Target the swarm's command cluster," she ordered. "Fire!" The moon seemed to shudder as the railgun fired. A chunk of refined metal the size of a city block shot out of the lunar surface at relativistic speeds. In space, it was invisible to the naked eye, just a streak of distorted light racing across the solar system. When it hit the swarm formation, the impact released more energy than a star going supernova. Dozens of swarm ships simply vaporized. The survivors were thrown off course by the gravitational waves of the impact, but Elena wasn't done. The moon fired again, and again. Each shot was precisely calculated to hit the swarm where they were most vulnerable. Across the galaxy, beings watched their screens in stunned silence. The humans weren't just fighting the Void Swarm. They were winning. Lady Kess of the Ethereal Collective stared at her viewing screen in disbelief. She had posted the human speech as entertainment. She had mocked their desperation. She had bet against their survival. Now she was watching them tear apart the most dangerous force in the galaxy. "This is impossible," she whispered to herself. The swarm has never been defeated, never even been slowed down, but the evidence was right in front of her. The mechanical plague that had consumed 12 star systems was retreating from Earth's solar system. Not destroyed, but damaged badly enough that it was pulling back to regroup. Admiral Chen received the reports from across her fleet. 12 human ships lost, 3 Korth vessels damaged. But the swarm was in full retreat, leaving behind the wreckage of hundreds of their own ships. "Ma'am," her communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. President Martinez wants to know if we're pursuing the enemy." Lisa looked at the retreating swarm ships on her screen. They were heading toward the Kepler system, where the hive minds lived. The same insectoid species that had laughed at Sarah's speech were about to face the Void Swarm alone. The smart tactical decision was to let the swarm go. Earth was safe. Humanity had proven its point. They could rebuild their defenses and prepare for the next attack. But Lisa Chen was Sarah Chen's sister. She knew what humanity really stood for. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships pursue the enemy. The hive minds may have refused to help us, but we don't abandon people who need help." Her crew stared at her in amazement. They had just fought the battle of their lives. Now their admiral wanted to chase the swarm to another star system to help the very beings who had mocked Earth's plea for aid. "Ma'am," her tactical officer said slowly, "the hive minds voted against helping us. They called us violent and primitive." Lisa smiled. The same smile her sister had worn when facing down the Galactic Council. "Then, it's time to show them what violent and primitive really looks like when it's fighting for someone else. The human fleet turned toward Kepler 442, leaving Earth's solar system for the first time as conquerors, but heading to another world as protectors. The Kepler 442 system was dying. Queen Zacht of the Greater Hive watched her beautiful worlds burn from her command ship. The Void Swarm had arrived 2 days ago, and her people's defenses had lasted exactly 4 hours. The insectoid beings had built their civilization around logic and efficiency. Their military tactics were precise, their weapons were perfectly calibrated, and their strategies had been tested for thousands of years. Against any normal enemy, the hive minds would have been nearly unbeatable. But the Void Swarm was not normal. The mechanical plague adapted to everything the hive threw at them. Energy shields were analyzed and countered within minutes. Missile patterns were predicted and neutralized. Even the hive's greatest advantage, their perfect mental coordination, meant nothing against an enemy that could process information faster than any biological brain. My queen buzzed. General Vraktar, his forearms trembling with exhaustion. The fourth world has fallen. The swarm is consuming our cities. Our people are evacuating to the core worlds, but he didn't need to finish. Everyone knew there was nowhere left to run. Queen Zacht had ruled the hive for 300 years. She had seen wars, plagues, and natural disasters, but she had never faced extinction. Her people were among the oldest members of the Galactic Council. They had helped write the laws that governed civilized space. Now those laws meant nothing. The Council's other members were too far away to help, even if they wanted to. And why would they want to? The hive had voted against helping the humans. They had mocked Earth's primitive desperation. Now they faced the same desperate situation with no one to turn to. Send another message to the Council, she ordered. Tell them we need immediate military assistance. General Vraktar's wings drooped. My queen, we have sent 47 messages. The replies are all the same. The nearest Council fleet is 8 weeks away. They promised to send a memorial delegation after the swarm moves on. A memorial delegation. The galactic government she had served faithfully for centuries was already writing her obituary. Queen Zacht was about to respond when every screen in the command center suddenly lit up with new contacts. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Swarm reinforcements? She asked, her voice hollow. General Vraktar studied the sensor readings, his compound eyes widening in disbelief. No, my queen, the ships, they're human. On the main screen, the fleet that had just arrived spread across space in their characteristic chaotic formation. Battle-scarred vessels with hull patches and jury-rigged weapons. Ships that looked like they had been through hell and come back fighting. Leading them was the TDF Defiance, Admiral Lisa Chen's flagship still smoking from her battle in Earth's solar system. The Hive Command Center fell silent. These were the same beings they had mocked 6 months ago. The primitive species that had begged for help and been refused. They had traveled across the galaxy to reach a system that was not their home, to fight an enemy that was not their problem, for people who had rejected them. Incoming transmission, reported the communications officer, her voice barely a whisper. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired. Her uniform was singed and there was a bandage on her forehead, but her eyes were steady and determined. Queen Zacht, she said formally. This is Admiral Lisa Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received reports that you're having some trouble with uninvited guests. Request permission to assist. The Queen stared at the screen. In the background, she could see human crew members working frantically to repair battle damage while simultaneously preparing for another fight. These people had just finished saving their own world. Now they wanted to save hers. Admiral Chen, she managed to say. Why? Your species owes us nothing. We voted against helping you. Lisa Chen's expression didn't change. Ma'am, my sister says that civilization isn't about who helps you when times are good. It's about who stands with you when everything's going to hell. Behind the human fleet, more ships were arriving. The Korth warships, their hulls decorated with fresh battle scars and kill markers. The Wanderer Nomad vessels, ancient but well-armed. Even ships the Queen didn't recognize. Species that had been forgotten or cast out by the galactic community. How many ships do you have? General Vraktar asked in amazement. About 800 combat vessels, Admiral Chen replied, plus support ships, medical frigates, and some very large guns courtesy of Dr. Vasquez and Project Prometheus. 800 ships. The Hive's entire remaining fleet numbered less than 50 vessels. "Admiral," Queen Zath said slowly, "the Void Swarm has already destroyed most of our defenses. They've adapted to our weapons, learned our tactics. They're stronger than ever." Lisa Chen smiled grimly. "Ma'am, humans have a saying. The enemy's greatest victory comes right before their worst defeat. These machines may have adapted to your tactics, but they've never fought humans and our friends together." The battle for Kepler 442 began differently than any previous swarm engagement. Instead of meeting the mechanical plague in open space, the human fleet split into dozens of smaller groups. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking fast and disappearing before the swarm could adapt. When the machines finally learned to counter those attacks, the humans had already switched to something else. The Korth used their massive ships as mobile fortresses, anchoring the human formations while smaller vessels swarmed around them. The Wanderers, experts at ship-to-ship combat, took out swarm scouts before they could report back to the main force. But the real surprise was how the humans coordinated with the hive minds themselves. General Marcus Stone had arrived with the second wave of human ships. His ground forces were already landing on hive worlds, not to conquer but to establish defensive positions. Human soldiers worked alongside hive warriors, sharing tactics and resources. "Your warriors are brave," General Vraktar admitted as he watched the joint forces push back a swarm landing force. "But they fight so chaotically," Stone laughed. "General, chaos is what humans do best. See, the swarm expects logical, predictable responses. When we do something completely random, their programming can't keep up." To prove his point, Stone ordered a squadron of human fighters to perform what he called a Crazy Ivan, a maneuver that involved flying directly at the enemy, then suddenly reversing course and firing in all directions. It made no tactical sense whatsoever. It worked perfectly. The swarm ships, expecting the humans to continue their attack run, moved to intercept. When the fighters suddenly reversed, the mechanical ships flew right into the weapons fire they had been trying to avoid. Dr. Elena Vasquez had arrived with something special, a mobile version of the lunar railgun, mounted on a massive human battleship called the Terra's Hammer. The weapon could punch through multiple swarm ships with a single shot, but even more effective was her new creation, viral programming that could infect swarm systems. Instead of destroying the mechanical beings, it turned them against each other. "The swarm shares information instantly across their network," Elena explained to Queen Zath during a brief lull in the fighting. "That's their greatest strength. But it's also their biggest weakness. When we introduce chaos into their system, it spreads everywhere." The Queen watched in fascination as captured swarm ships suddenly turned on their former allies. The perfect coordination that made the machines so dangerous was breaking down into confusion and friendly fire. "Your species thinks very differently than we do," she observed. Elena smiled. "Your Majesty, humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've gotten very good at breaking things that seem unbreakable." The tide of battle turned when Admiral Chen implemented what became known as the Soul Gambit. Instead of trying to destroy every swarm ship, the human fleet focused on capturing their command vessels. Once they had control of the swarm's leadership, they could turn the entire mechanical force against itself. It took 3 days of constant fighting, but when the battle ended, the Kepler 442 system was free. The Void Swarm was not just defeated, it was broken. The survivors fled toward the outer rim, their programming too damaged to pose a threat to anyone. Queen Zath stood in the ruins of her capital city, watching human medics treat hive wounded with the same care they gave their own soldiers. Human engineers worked alongside her people to rebuild damaged infrastructure. Human teachers were already learning hive languages so they could help educate war orphans. "Admiral Chen," she said when Lisa came to check on the relief efforts, "I must ask again. Why did you help us? We gave you no reason to care about our survival." Lisa Chen looked out at the mixed groups of humans and hive minds working together in the rubble. "Your Majesty," she said quietly, "my species has a saying, we judge others by their worst moments, but we hope to be judged by our best ones. You voted against us when you were afraid. That doesn't mean you deserve to die." She paused, watching a human soldier share his rations with a group of young hive minds who had lost their parents. "Besides," she added, "we're not doing this for gratitude. We're doing it because it's right, and because someone has to stand up for the species that can't stand up for themselves, word of humanity's victory at Kepler 442, spread across the galaxy even faster than the mockery had 6 months earlier. This time, no one was laughing. The species that had been called Primitive Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Council chamber once again. But this time she was not alone. Behind her walked Queen Zakth of the Hive Minds, her royal robes still bearing scorch marks from the recent battle. Chief Warlord Grakmor of the Korth held his ceremonial hammer high, its surface decorated with symbols representing the Human Korth Alliance. The nomad leader Drifter of Stars spoke softly with the crystal singers of the forgotten clans. 14 species in total, all of them saved by human intervention, all of them here to witness what came next. The chamber was packed as never before. Every seat was filled, and additional beings floated or hovered in the aisles. News networks from across the galaxy broadcast the session live. The entire civilized universe was watching. Council Speaker Thane Vor sat in his high chair, but his posture was different now. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by careful wariness. His yellow eyes darted between Sarah and her allies, clearly uncertain how to handle this unprecedented situation. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler 442. In that time, the human fleet had not returned to Earth to celebrate their victory. Instead, they had continued moving through the galaxy, hunting down the scattered remains of the Void Swarm wherever it tried to regroup. They had saved the mining colonies of the Outer Rim when swarm remnants attacked the crystal harvesters. They had protected the research stations of the Science Consortium when mechanical scouts tried to steal their data. They had even defended the vacation worlds of the entertainment sector when a damaged swarm cluster crashed into the luxury resorts. Each time, humanity had asked for nothing in return. No payment, no territory, no political favors. They simply fought the galaxy's enemies and moved on to the next crisis. The galaxy that had once mocked Earth's desperation was now watching Earth's ships with something approaching awe. Sarah activated her translator and looked up at Speaker Thane Vor. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. "Honored Council," she began. "3 months ago, I stood in this chamber and asked for your help. You refused. You called humanity too young, too violent, too primitive to deserve a place in galactic civilization." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Many beings shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Today I return not to ask for anything but to offer something. A new way forward for all of us," she gestured to her companions. "The species standing with me represent billions of lives that would have been lost without human intervention. But more than that, they represent a different philosophy than the one that has governed this galaxy for too long." Queen Zakth stepped forward. When she spoke, her words were transmitted in perfect galactic standard. "The hive minds have served on this council for 6,000 years. We believed in the old ways, that advancement meant superiority, that age meant wisdom, that the strong had no obligation to help the weak." Her compound eyes fixed on Speaker Thane Vor. "We were wrong. Humanity showed us that true civilization is not measured by how advanced your technology is, but by how willingly you share it. Not by how long your species has existed, but by how much you sacrifice for others." Chief Warlord Grakmor's voice boomed through the chamber. "The Korth were exiled from this council for being too aggressive. But humans showed us how to use aggression righteously, not to conquer but to protect. Now the galaxy calls us heroes instead of savages." One by one, the other species told their stories. The Wanderers spoke of humans sharing resources with people who had no home. The Forgotten Clans described human engineers working for months to restore their damaged worlds. The Outer Rim colonists talked about human medics who stayed behind to treat the wounded even as new threats approached. Each testimony hit the council like a physical blow. These were not the words of conquered peoples or grateful refugees. These were the voices of equals describing allies who had chosen to help when no one else would. Sarah let their words sink in before continuing. "The current galactic government is based on hierarchy," she said. "The oldest species rule. The most advanced civilizations set policy. The strongest militaries enforce order. But what happens when age brings arrogance instead of wisdom? When advancement creates indifference instead of understanding? When strength is used to maintain power instead of protecting the innocent?" She paused, looking around the chamber. "You get a government that watches billions die rather than risk its own comfort. You get leaders who turn their backs on species that need help because it's inconvenient. You get a civilization that has forgotten what civilization actually means. Speaker Thanevor finally found his voice. The human speaks of change, he said coldly. But the current system has maintained peace for 10,000 years. Our way works, Sarah smiled. It was the same smile she had worn when leaving the chamber 9 months ago, but now it carried a different meaning. Speaker Thanevor, your way worked as long as nothing really threatened it. But when the Void Swarm came, where was your peace? When species faced extinction, where was your order? When the galaxy needed heroes, where were your leaders? She stepped closer to the center of the chamber. They were here in this room making excuses for why they couldn't help. The chamber erupted in conversation as council members argued among themselves. Some defended the old system. Others admitted its failures. A few began openly supporting the human position. Sarah raised her hand for silence. I'm not here to destroy the Galactic Council. I'm here to propose something better. Something that includes everyone, not just the oldest and strongest. Behind her, Queen Zacht activated a holographic projector. The image that appeared showed a new kind of government structure. Not a pyramid with the powerful at the top, but a circle where every species had an equal voice. The Terran Confederation, Sarah announced. A voluntary alliance where membership is based not on how old your civilization is or how advanced your technology might be, but on one simple question. Will you stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves? Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped forward, her Project Prometheus badge gleaming on her uniform. We're offering to share everything. Our technology, our tactics, our knowledge, not for profit or political advantage, but because knowledge belongs to everyone. General Marcus Stone added his voice. We're proposing a defense force that protects all member species equally. Not based on their ability to pay or their political importance, but simply because they're part of our community. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of humanity's proposal sank in. They weren't trying to replace the Galactic Council with human rule. They were offering to create something entirely new, a government based on service instead of power. Speaker Thanevor stood up slowly. His massive form cast its familiar shadow, but somehow he seemed smaller than before. The humans ask us to abandon thousands of years of tradition, he said, to throw away a system that has served the galaxy well. And for what? The untested idealism of a species that has existed for less than a galactic standard year. He looked around the chamber, seeking support from his fellow council members, but many of them avoided his gaze. Some were openly staring at the human delegation with something approaching admiration. What guarantee do we have that this Terran Confederation will not simply become human domination by another name? He demanded. Sarah Chen stepped forward one final time. She had faced this chamber as a desperate supplicant, been mocked and rejected and returned as the representative of a new galactic order. Now she spoke the words that would be remembered for generations. Speaker Thanevor, you ask what guarantee you have that humanity won't seek to dominate the galaxy. Here's your answer. Earth doesn't want to rule anyone. We've proven that by our actions. When we had the power to conquer the hive worlds after saving them, we rebuilt their cities instead. When we could have demanded tribute from the species we rescued, we gave them aid instead. She paused, her voice growing stronger. You want a guarantee? Here it is. In the Terran Confederation, no single species will hold ultimate power, including humanity. Every decision will require consensus. Every policy will need majority support. And any species that tries to dominate the others will be opposed by all the rest, including Earth. But most importantly, she continued, the Confederation will be voluntary. No one will be forced to join. No one will be punished for leaving. And no one will be excluded for being too young, too primitive, or too different. She looked directly at Speaker Thanevor. Even the Dominion will be welcome if you choose to join. Because that's what civilized beings do. They forgive past mistakes and work together for a better future. The silence that followed was profound. Then slowly, Queen Zacht began to click in the hive mind pattern for approval. Chief Warlord Grackmore struck his hammer against the floor in the Korth gesture of agreement. One by one, the other species added their voices to the growing chorus of support. Then something unprecedented happened. Council members began to stand. First one, then a dozen, then hundreds. The representatives of species that had governed the galaxy for millennia were rising to show support for a radical new vision, proposed by the youngest civilization in known space, Speaker. Thanevor looked around the chamber in growing shock. His authority,